Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we've got some pretty interesting figures to take a look at. These figures I think are probably like cut down the middle as far as people that like them and people that don't, because we've got Imaginext. Now I don't really review the Imaginext figures that often. From time to time I do, but specifically I usually kind of try to cover these little ones because they almost remind me of like really cute little hatchling versions of, you know, the Mattel figures. So I think they work well when you look at them as being hatchlings for the Mattel figures. So that's why I kind of try to cover these ones at the very least. And I've actually had these here for probably a solid 2 months or so, and I just have not gotten around to popping them open and getting them up here on the channel because I'm never all that super psyched about, you know, the Imaginext line, but these ones do actually look pretty cool. And now having pulled them up here finally, specifically the Indoraptor, I don't know why I haven't already opened that one because it does look really neat and I'm quite intrigued to see it. But you can see we've got quite a few species here, as we have the Indoraptor, we've got the Indominus Rex, we also have a Drax, a Pteranodon, and then this last one has a 2-pack, which actually features smaller than normal versions of the Dilophosaurus and Giganotosaurus. So pretty interesting when it comes to the species we have here, and you know, again, they've been sitting here long enough. I think it's about time I pop these open, so let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll bring them in from there. So here we go, we've now got them all out of their packaging, and they do look pretty fun. I can instantly say that my favorites, though, are the Indominus and Indoraptor, because they just look really cool. And even though the eye of the Indominus isn't the coloration it should be, that blue eye looks gorgeous. It really pops, but each and every one of them do look really cool. And I think I would say my least favorite are, you know, right out of the gate, which it's hard to tell because I haven't truly taken a closer look and judged them fully yet, but would be these smaller ones, because even though they look kind of neat, I feel like they look a little bit goofier than they even normally would. And I don't think I have this one standing very well, but he doesn't really have articulation or anything, so he's hard to get to stand. I think he might be just a little warped. But another really cool round of figures again when it comes to these. They usually release them with like 4 to 5 new figures, and that's what we have this time. Actually, we have 6, but we have 5 different packs because each one of these are an individual pack, and then that one would be a pack together. So I'm pretty excited regardless to take a closer look at them, so let's jump to it and do just that. So we'll begin with these little tiny ones first, as this is a 2-pack that features the Giganotosaurus and Dilophosaurus. You can see they sport pretty much the type of detailing and everything you would expect for an Imaginext version of a very goofy looking Dilophosaurus. I think the crest looks pretty bad. That's like my one area on this one that I think I like the least, especially the way that the head is kind of shaped and the way it runs up into the crest. It just doesn't look good if you ask me. Even the detailing of the frill looks a little questionable, and nothing about this Dilophosaurus is really that appealing to me. He's cute, yes, I'll give him that, but outside of being cute, kind of, he's a little bit ugly. We do have red eyes, and I do like the fact that the Imaginext figures usually have the glass eye effect, but this one, it's a very awkward one because you can see it's hard to actually get it to a position where you can see the pupils, similar to like Hammond collection figures, and the eye is so dark, it's actually really quite hard to really see anything depending on the way the light hits it. So not a big fan of the eye of that one. Outside of that, you can see the fine detail at least looks kind of okay. You can see you've got some decent skin texture and stuff throughout, and you know, your kind of traditional sort of standard pose for one of these, as they almost always have that curve in the tail, and you do see that yet again with the Dilophosaurus. No paintwork for the inside of the mouth, and in fact we have pretty much the bare minimum of paintwork because we only have a green for the body and then an orangish tone for the frill, and that's it. You have nothing else going on as far as paintwork again, except for of course the glass eye. So pretty lackluster when it comes to paint. They're usually not really that colorful or, you know, that impressive in the paint department, but these ones I think are even a little bit worse than your usual figures. And the same can be said for the Giganotosaurus. Even if he looks kind of cool, they've sort of captured the way that the ridges look and everything on the back. Again, as far as the way you would normally see for a figure like this, it looks like, yes, we do actually have articulation on this one. I don't think the Dilophosaurus had any articulation. I'll have to take a look at that in a moment. But I do think the glass eye eye looks a little better on this one, and the fine detail also looks pretty decent, if we can not knock the camera over, but if you get a nice closer look there at the skin texture, it looks pretty okay. You can see the teeth are sculpted out. The detailing of the lower jaw, though, is as muted as it gets, as in there's like nothing detail-wise on there at all, and pretty much the entire underside doesn't really sport a whole lot of detail. But when you come up to the back of the Giga, you can see again, and of course the legs and everything, the skin texture looks pretty good. You've got some osteoderms and stuff popping up here and there. You've also got the turn in the tail, nice short stubby tail, again making it look like a baby. And this one isn't really, again, another figure that's going to win any awards. It's kind of like a purplish blue, actually, now that I look at it in the light. It's a very interesting tone of color. And it's, of course, also not a figure that sort of follows the appearance of the Jurassic World Dominion Giganotosaurus, but he's a little more fun, I think, than the Dilophosaurus was. Let's see how far that head can turn. That head can actually turn all the way around. So I do like that, at least, giving you a little bit of posability with the Giga. And I am a pretty big fan of the Giganotosaurus from Jurassic World Dominion, so it's pretty neat to have this, but it's definitely not, again, one of my favorites from this round of these sort of hatchling figures. And bringing the Dilo back up, it looks as though we do have articulation, but you can only kind of twist the head here. Oh, that doesn't sound healthy. I don't know what that noise was, but you can sort of twist the head around, but that's really about all you're going to get when it comes to that one and its articulation. We do also have the Pteranodon, and I do like him. I think he looks actually really quite awesome. He reminds me of like an old school movie monster version of a Pteranodon, something I would see in like a stop motion film. And I think that's one of the things I like most about him. He just has that vintage sort of a feel. But the eye is gorgeous on this. You can see that glass eye is looking really good when it comes to the Pteranodon, and I really like the tones of color as well. The actual texturing also looks really nice on this figure. You can see that the skin texture, even leading up into the beak, looks great. We've got the nostrils right there, the crest, of course, up there in the top of the head. We do have articulation in the neck on the Pteranodon, so you can get the head turning pretty much any way you would want. So definitely like that as well. You have this light greenish tone here. Actually, it's like a greenish yellow for the underside of the Pteranodon. You don't really see a whole lot of texturing going on down there, but you do have a little bit. You also have the ability to kind of articulate the wings, so you can kind of lift them up if he wants to do that, or you can kind of put them down so that it's standing and everything. I do like that as well, definitely giving you a little bit more posability. You can see that the texturing in the wings looks really good. We've got kind of like some bumpy scales moving through the skin of the wings on both sides. You, of course, don't have painted nails, but they do sort of seem to have a gloss coat, especially the rear legs back there. You can see those have a very nice shiny look to them. And again, the detailing here on the back also looks pretty decent. So the Pteranodon is actually pretty cool. Oh, we do have articulated legs as well. So this one actually sports quite a bit when it comes to the articulation. I don't know why I thought that the legs wouldn't articulate, but they do, and they move pretty nicely. So the Pteranodon is actually pretty cool, and I would say probably one of my favorites from this round. The Dracorex, not so much a favorite of mine. You know, it looks okay for what it is, but I'm not a big fan of the coloration straight out of the gate. I don't really think that... I mean, it could absolutely be a naturalistic coloration, but it's a little bit too goofy for me, especially this kind of like hot, reddish pink sort of coloration we have up here on the top of the head. Really not a fan of that. But when it comes to the fine detail, it does look pretty nice, and you can see a nice glossy look there to the beak, kind of a satin shine, which is pretty cool. The eye, again, with a glass eye, looks pretty nice, that nice greenish tone in there. And the eyes look a lot nicer on these than the Hammond Collection figures, so I've got to give them props as far as that goes. You can see that, again, we've got a light tone, sort of like a brownish gray down here for the underside of our dinosaur, and then you've got like this maroonish tone moving through. We have very bumpy sort of osteoderms moving through a large portion of the figure, even down into the legs. Again, you've got articulation in the arms as well as the legs. Pretty darn nice and smooth as far as that goes. Doesn't look like, nothing going on when it comes to the neck or the tail, so only the arms and legs when it comes to the articulation. No nail paint yet again, but you can see again a shine for the nails, so they sort of do give you a little bit as far as that goes. And again, as far as classic sort of Imaginext figures go, we've got that curve in the tail like we've seen on pretty much everything so far outside of the Pteranodon. But even though it's not my favorite, it is still a pretty cute looking figure. Then we've got the Indominus. Now, I don't say that this one looks perfect to what an Indominus would look like, but it at least looks kind of close. And, I think that's all you can ask for when it comes to a Imaginext figure. But look at those eyes. Man, are those eyes ever gorgeous. Like, they are the type of eyes that hypnotize you. I don't know what it is about that tone of color they've used and the way it shines on those eyes, but man, do they ever look good. Obviously not the coloration of the eyes of the Indominus, but it still looks really nice. I think the actual tones of color they've chosen for the figure outside of that, though, are about as close as you're going to see for an Imaginext figure, so that's a plus as well. And again, it's about as close to what you're probably going to see when it comes to accuracy-wise of an Indominus Rex as well. The skin texture actually looks really good on this. Yet again, very vibrant and crisp moving through. Obviously, we've got that curve in the tail yet again, and you can see the head sculpt as well looks pretty decent. The teeth don't look like they're actually painted, but they seem to have a glossy coat to them, sort of a satin shine, which sort of makes them look like they're painted, which I think is the first time through this run of figures that we've sort of had that going on, because most of them are just very obviously not painted. You've got kind of like this grayish tone for the upper body, and then this light sort of an off-white or light gray for the underside as well. Again, articulation-wise, no neck articulation or anything, but you do have arm articulation as well as leg articulation, which is very stiff right now, but you can get it to move pretty darn nicely. And again, a satin shine for the nails, but no actually nail paint. But the Indominus is definitely really fun. I actually really quite like this figure, and I would say this one would be my favorite, except the Indoraptor just looks so darn cool. I actually really like this one, and the coloration of this one is actually a very dark green rather than a black, which is kind of surprising. I expected it to be a black, but it just looks so exaggerated and goofy, but in the best possible way. You can see the teeth are, sculpted out right here. Absolutely no paintwork for the teeth. They didn't even attempt to have that going on. The eye also looks really nice when it comes to the coloration. Again, I wouldn't say it's exactly the coloration you would see of the eye of an Indoraptor, but it looks pretty cool, and you can see it looking really nice as far as like the pupil and everything in there. We have the greenish tone for the body, which actually looks really cool, and then of course that yellow-orange sort of a stripe moving down through the course of the Indoraptor, which looks really neat. We do have, again, a little bit of a satin shine for the nails, but no nail paint yet again. Articulation-wise, nothing going on, again, except for the legs and arms and stuff. The standard moving through pretty much all of these, which means the Pteranodon of all figures had the most articulation out of all of these. Obviously, we can see again, though, that we've got a very strong curve to the tail, something you see quite often when it comes to the Imaginext figures. I can actually even see the quills there on the back of the elbow of the Indoraptor, and we kind of have them up here on the back of the head. Look more like ridges up here, actually, rather than quills, but it definitely looks really cool. I'm actually a pretty darn big fan of the Indoraptor. Even though he's super goofy looking, there's just something about him that I really like. So I would absolutely say the Indoraptor is my favorite one out of all of these new sort of Imaginext hatchling figures. Now, I don't feel like we need to do sizes or comparisons or anything like that when it comes to these figures. I would imagine at this point we've got a pretty good idea as far as how they, size up overall, because these type of figures have been released for quite some time. So no need to really do any of that stuff, I think, as far as this round of releases go. So these brand new Imaginext Jurassic World hatchling figures are actually pretty cool. Some not so great, some definitely a lot better. None are what I would consider a masterpiece or even an amazing figure, but they are fun for what they are. And you can see we've got quite a few different species this time around, and some of which I think we've seen before in this line, potentially. Some of which are definitely new, but all of which at least look kind of decent. The worst of all is definitely the Dilophosaurus. I don't think he looks very good, and the crest and everything just looks super awkward on that figure. I'm not a huge fan of the coloration either. I think it just looks weird overall, so I'm not a big fan of that one. But at the same time, you also do have that little Giganotosaurus included with the Dilophosaurus, and even though he's kind of ugly as well, I do still like the Giga, and I think he's kind of a cute little version of the Jurassic World Dominion Giganotosaurus, so he's not that bad, I guess. And then if we continue in the direction of my least favorite to my favorite, we've got the Drax would be next. I think it looks okay for what it is. It also has some pretty nice fine detail, but I'm just not a big fan of the coloration of that one for some reason. I think it could have looked cool, and it's not that it looks bad, but it's just not really my cup of tea personally. It's mostly the coloration on the head, I think that, you know, really messes that one up for me, but obviously some people will look at that differently. Some people might really quite like that. So that one's okay, but not really that great. Next in line, I would say, would be the Pteranodon, and the Pteranodon actually looks really cool. And as I said, it very much so reminds me of almost like a vintage sort of interpretation of a Pteranodon, which, of course, if you know me, you know I love vintage dinosaurs and, you know, anything, of course, vintage when it comes to prehistoric life, and in this case would be a flying reptile, and I think that's one of the reasons why I really quite dig the Pteranodon. Also, he has quite a bit of articulation, you know, one spot more as far as the articulation goes than anyone else here. The Indominus would definitely be next in line, and the Indominus is really neat to have just because it's cool to have an Indominus as far as this sort of like hatchling version, but also those blue eyes are just hypnotizing to me. They really just draw me in, but overall he's a pretty neat looking figure, and again, even though none of these are what I would consider even close to a screen accurate version of what I think a baby version of that species would look like, he's still pretty neat looking. But the best of all, if you ask me, would be the Indoraptor. And I think the Indoraptor looks really neat. He's got a very cool looking sculpt to him, but mostly the paint is what I think I like the most about it. And of course, the sort of goofy, exaggerated look that he has going on. But I really like the tone of green they've used on it. Even though the Indoraptor is a black, for some reason that green just looks so cool. And the stripe moving down looks really neat as a whole. Again, all of these figures sport articulation in one area or another, so that's also pretty fun as far as these figures go. So if you are interested in grabbing yourself some of these, make sure you check your local Walmart. I have heard of some other people finding them there. Even though I acquired these a few months ago from Entertainment Earth, I have seen people beginning to find them recently at Walmart. So make sure you check your local Walmart, or I will of course include a link in the description to where I purchased the entire batch of these on Entertainment Earth. So make sure you grab these if you are interested, and also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.